Hello, dear friend. Welcome back to the Sleeping Tones. Tonight, we drift into the world of a composer who turned the piano into a vessel for the human soul, who showed us that exile can be transformed into art, and who proved that some hearts never truly leave home, no matter where the body wanders. Tonight, we explore the life and legacy of Frédéric Chopin, the poet of the piano, the man whose music still whispers of longing and beauty, of Poland and Paris, of love and loss. So settle into your pillows, let the weight of the day dissolve, and allow yourself to be carried away by the story of this remarkable soul, this exile who became immortal, this fragile man who created something indestructible. It is a mild spring morning in the Polish countryside, just west of Warsaw. The date is March 1st, 1810. In a modest manor house at Żelazowa Wola, surrounded by the flat fields of Mazovia, a child draws his first breath. His parents name him Frédéric Franciszek Chopin. The world will come to know him by the French version of his name, Frédéric Chopin, though he will always think of himself as Polish to his very core. The room where he is born is simple but comfortable. Whitewashed walls, a few pieces of worn furniture, a window overlooking gardens where pear trees are just beginning to bud. The manor belongs to the Skarbek family, wealthy Polish nobility who employ his father as a tutor. It is not a grand estate by aristocratic standards, not a palace with hundreds of rooms, but it is substantial, the kind of place where old families maintain traditions even as the world around them crumbles. Nicolas Chopin, Mikołaj in Polish, is himself a curious figure. Born in the village of Marinville-sur-Madon in Lorraine, France, he came to Poland as a young man of 16 and never looked back. The year was 1787. Poland was still independent then, though already weakening. Nicholas came as a clerk, working for a tobacco manufacturer. But when revolution swept through Poland, when Tadeusz Kościuszko led his famous uprising of 1794, attempting to defend Polish independence against the empires that surrounded it, Nicola joined the fight. He was a soldier in the Polish insurgent forces. He carried a musket. He stood on barricades. He believed in the cause of Polish freedom even though he was French by birth. When the uprising failed, when the Russian and Prussian armies crushed the last hope of an independent Poland, Nicolas stayed. He could have returned to France. But Poland had become his country. Its language was his language. Its struggles were his struggles. He found work as a tutor. He taught French to the children of aristocratic families. And at the Skarbek estate, he met Justyna Krzyżanowska. Tekla. Justyna is her full name. She was a relative of the Skarbeks, a poor relation serving as a lady's companion. She was gentle, musical, deeply Polish. She played piano. She sang. She had warm eyes and a kind disposition. They married in 1806. Nicholas was 35. Justyna was 24. Their first child, Ludwika, was born in 1807. Then came Frederick in 1810, then Isabella in 1811, and finally Emilia in 1812. Their son Frederick is the second of 4 children. His older sister Ludwika will become his first piano teacher. His 2 younger sisters, Isabella and Emilia, will grow up in his musical shadow. Emilia, the youngest, will die of tuberculosis at age 14, a tragedy that will mark the family forever. But in March of 1810, as the infant Frédéric lies in his mother's arms, these sorrows are still years away. There is only the present moment, the spring morning, the sound of bird outside the window, the beginning of a life. But from the very beginning, there is something different about this boy. Poland in 1810 exists only in name. What was once the great Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a vast realm that stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, has been carved up by Russia, Prussia, and Austria in a series of brutal partitions. The first partition of 1772 took large territories. The second partition of 1793 took more. The third partition of 1795 erased Poland from the map entirely. For more than a decade, there was no Polish state. The nation survived only as a memory, a language, a culture stubbornly maintained in the face of foreign occupation. Napoleon Bonaparte changed that, briefly. In 1807, after defeating Prussia, he created the Duchy of Warsaw. It was a small, semi-independent state, a puppet regime, really. But it gave Poles hope. The duchy had its own army, its own government, its own constitution written by Napoleon himself. Polish was the official language. Old symbols were revived. For the first time in over a decade, Poland existed on maps again. But the duchy was fragile. It depended entirely on French military power. It depended on Napoleon winning his wars. And Napoleon, in 1810, is at the height of his power, but also overextended. He controls most of Europe. He has defeated Austria and Prussia. He is allied with Russia through a treaty. But the alliance is uneasy. Storm clouds are gathering. Within 2 years, Napoleon will invade Russia. Within 5 years, he will be defeated at Waterloo. And when Napoleon falls, the Duchy of Warsaw will fall with him. The Chopin family lives in this uncertain world. They know that nothing is permanent. They know that empires rise and fall. They know that Poland's brief resurrection might be temporary. But they also know how to endure, how to maintain dignity in difficult times, how to create beauty even when the future is uncertain. They are not wealthy, but they are cultured. Nicholas speaks perfect Polish despite his French birth. He has worked hard to master the language, to understand the literature, to become Polish in more than just residence. He reads French books, novels by Voltaire and Rousseau. But he also reads Polish poetry. He plays the flute and violin, not at a professional level, but competently, enough to bring music into the household. Justina plays piano. She is self-taught, or perhaps taught by a local musician in her youth. Her technique is probably not refined, but she has feeling. She has musicality. And when she plays, when she sings Polish folk songs or the simpler pieces of popular composers, something in the air changes. The room fills with something more than sound. The household is filled with music and conversation, not grand philosophical debates, not salon discussions of Kant and Hegel, but the kind of everyday talk that happens in educated families. Nicola discusses his students. Justina mentions a letter from relatives. They talk about the garden, the weather, the political news from Warsaw. And always, underneath, there is music. Someone humming, someone playing, notes drifting through the rooms. And into this atmosphere, young Frédéric arrives, sensitive and observant. Even as an infant, his mother notices something unusual. When she plays piano, when she sings, the baby's face changes. His eyes widen. Sometimes he seems to listen with an intensity that is uncanny. Sometimes when certain harmonies are struck, when certain melodies are sung, tears appear on his infant cheeks, not from distress, from something else. an emotional response that is beyond naming. When Frédéric is just 8 months old, the family moves to Warsaw. Nicholas has been offered a position teaching French at the Warsaw Lyceum, a prestigious school housed first in the Saxon Palace, then later in the Kazimierz Palace. The position comes with an apartment, not luxurious but respectable. The family is given rooms on the palace grounds. They are not rich, but they move in educated circles. They are part of that middle stratum of society. Tutors and teachers, musicians and minor bureaucrats. People who serve the aristocracy without being aristocrats themselves. Warsaw in 1810 is a city of approximately 60,000 people. It sits on both banks of the Vistula River, connected by a wooden bridge that sways alarmingly when heavy carts cross. The Old Town, with its medieval square and Gothic churches, preserves the memory of Poland's past. But the city is growing. New buildings rise, streets are paved, gas lights are beginning to replace oil lamps in the wealthier districts. It is a city of contradictions. On one hand, it is culturally vibrant. There are theaters where French plays are performed alongside Polish dramas. There is an opera house where Italian singers perform Mozart and Rossini. There are literary salons where poets read their work. There are philosophical societies where intellectuals debate. The aristocracy speaks French as often as Polish. They read Parisian newspapers. They follow fashion from Vienna and Berlin. They pride themselves on being cosmopolitan, cultured, enlightened. But it is also a city under occupation. Russian soldiers patrol the streets. The Tsar's representatives hold the real power. Grand Duke Constantine, brother of Tsar Alexander I, lives in Warsaw and commands the Polish army as if it were his personal possession. He is erratic, temperamental, sometimes cruel. He has Polish soldiers flogged for minor infractions. He reviews troops and shouts abuse at officers who displease him. The Poles tolerate him because they have no choice. Polish patriots gather in secret. In private rooms, behind locked doors, they speak of independence. They remember when Poland was great. They dream of throwing off Russian control. But they know the dream is dangerous. The Tsar's secret police are everywhere. Informers report on suspicious gatherings. Those suspected of sedition disappear, sent to Siberia, or simply arrested and held without trial. In this tense atmosphere, the Chopin family tries to live normally. Nicola opens a boarding house for boys attending the Lyceum. The apartment grows crowded with students. Justina helps manage the household, cooking meals and mending clothes and ensuring the boys do their studies. Money is always tight, but there is always enough, just enough. The young Frédéric grows up surrounded by older boys. He learns to navigate social dynamics. He learns to be charming without being obsequious. He learns to make people laugh with clever observations. He is small for his age, delicate, but he has a quick wit and an ability to mimic that entertains the older students. He can imitate a pompous professor's lecture style so perfectly that even the professors laugh when they hear about it. In this world, young Frédéric grows. And from the very beginning, music affects him in ways that seem almost supernatural. When his mother plays piano in the evening, simple pieces, nothing virtuosic, the boy stops whatever he is doing and listens with absolute concentration. His mother and sister Ludwika play duets, 4 hands at the keyboard, and Frédéric watches their fingers. Watches how the notes on the page correspond to sounds, watches how their hands move together to create harmony. When he hears certain harmonies, certain melodies, he weeps, not from sadness exactly, from something deeper, an emotional response that he cannot name or control, a minor chord resolving to major, a melody that rises and then falls in an unexpected way. These things move him to tears even when he is too young to understand why. His parents watch with amazement. This is not ordinary sensitivity. This is not a child who merely enjoys music. This is something rare, something that suggests a gift beyond the normal range of human experience. By the age of 5, Ludwika begins teaching him piano. She is only 7 years older, still a child herself, but she has been taking lessons and she knows the basics. She shows her little brother where to place his hands, how to curve his fingers, which keys make which sounds. And Friedrich absorbs everything instantly. Within weeks, he is playing simple melodies. Within months, he is improvising, making up his own tunes, experimenting with harmonies that Ludwika has never taught him. By 6, he is already trying to compose his own small pieces. He sits at the piano and works out melodies. He asks his father to write them down because he has not yet learned musical notation. Nicola, whose musical knowledge is limited, does his best. The results are crude, but the intent is clear. This child needs more than what his family can provide. This child needs a real teacher. His parents watch with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Pride, because their son is clearly gifted. Anxiety, because giftedness brings responsibility. They are not wealthy. They cannot afford an expensive teacher. But they also cannot ignore what is before them. This is not merely a child who likes to play piano. This is something more, something that demands cultivation. They ask around. They inquire among their social circle. Who teaches piano in Warsaw? Who is reputable? Who might take on a young student with unusual talent but limited means? And the name that comes back again and again is Wojciech Żywny. Wojciech Żywny is 60 years old when he first meets Frédéric Chopin. He is Czech by birth. His name in Czech would be Wojciech Żywny. But he has lived in Poland for decades, first as music tutor to Princess Sapieha's children, now as a respected teacher in Warsaw. He is not a famous composer. He is not a virtuoso, but he is a musician of intelligence and sensitivity, and he recognizes something extraordinary when he sees it. Żywny is a small man, always impeccably dressed in the style of an earlier generation. He wears a wig, carefully powdered. His coat is from the previous century's fashion but well-maintained. He speaks Polish with a slight Czech accent that never quite disappears. He has kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, and he has dedicated his life to teaching young people to love music. He has composed, certainly, piano pieces, violin sonatas, some orchestral works, but these are not published widely. They are competent, crafted in the classical style of Haydn and Mozart, showing the influence of Central European folk music. They are not groundbreaking. Żywny knows this about himself. He is a good musician, not a great one, but he is a very good teacher. And he understands that sometimes a teacher's greatest achievement is to recognize genius in a student and get out of its way. The lessons begin in 1816, when Frédéric is 6 years old. Żywny comes to the Chopin apartment twice a week, Tuesday and Friday afternoons. He carries a worn leather satchel containing sheet music, a small metronome, and a notebook where he records his students' progress. The Chopin family piano is an upright, not a grand, which would be too expensive and too large for their apartment, but a decent instrument kept in reasonable tune. Givny teaches basic technique, hand position, finger independence, scales in all keys, ascending and descending, arpeggios, simple exercises to build strength and coordination. He introduces the boy to the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, the preludes and fugues of the well-tempered clavier, simplified at first then gradually more complex. He teaches Haydn sonatas, Mozart variations, Clementi's Gradus ad Parnassum, the standard pedagogical repertoire. But Givny also does something remarkable, something that not every teacher would have the wisdom to do. He allows Frédéric freedom. Many piano teachers of the era are tyrants. They believe that children must be broken to the discipline of music, like horses broken to saddle. They force students into rigid patterns. They punish deviation with raps on the knuckles or harsh words. They demand that every note, every fingering, every interpretation conform to established rules. The piano is an instrument of precision, they say. There is a right way and a wrong way. Creativity comes later, after years of drilling fundamentals. Givny understands that such an approach would crush this particular student. Frédéric's imagination is too vivid, his instincts too personal, his emotional connection to music too deep and too strange. If Givny were to force him into orthodox patterns, something essential would be lost. The gift would survive, perhaps, but it would be diminished, constrained, made ordinary. So Givny teaches him the grammar of music and then lets him speak his own language. He shows Frédéric a Bach prelude. They work through it note by note. Givny explains how Bach creates a sense of forward momentum through continuous motion in the left hand, how the harmonies change subtly but inevitably, like a river flowing, how the voices interweave. And then, having taught the piece correctly, Givny says, "Now play it your way. Show me what you hear." And Frédéric plays it again, but differently. The tempo fluctuates slightly. Certain notes are held a fraction longer. Certain voices are brought out more prominently. It is still recognizably Bach, but it is also already Chopin, already someone hearing music in his own unique way. Givny listens, and instead of correcting, he nods. "Interesting," he says. "Tell me why you did that." And the 6-year-old boy explains, as best he can, that he heard the melody a certain way in his mind, that it seemed right to linger on that note, to emphasize that voice. He cannot articulate it fully. He is too young. But Givny understands. This child is not just playing notes. He is already interpreting, already creating. By age 7, Frédéric composes his first Polonaise, the Polish dance that carries the weight of national pride. The Polonaise is a ceremonial dance, stately and proud, with a characteristic rhythm that everyone in Poland knows. It is not fast. It does not leap and whirl like a mazurka. It processes. It declares. It embodies Polish nobility. Frédéric's first Polonaise is in G minor. It is short, perhaps 60 measures. But it is not childish. The melody has shape and character. The left-hand accompaniment provides solid harmonic support. There are moments, just moments, where the harmony shifts in unexpected ways. Nothing radical, but hints of a mind that hears beyond the conventional. Givny helps him write it down. Notation is still difficult for Frédéric. He understands it intellectually, but his hand is not yet practiced at drawing notes on staves. Givny sits beside him at the table guiding. "This note here, what pitch is it?" "Yes, F. And how long does it last?" "A quarter note?" "Good. Write it there." The process is laborious. but the result is a complete notated composition. Givny looks at it with something like wonder. He has taught many children. Some were talented, some were diligent, but he has never encountered anything quite like this. He takes the manuscript to Father Isidor Józef Cybulski, a composer and one of the few music engravers in Warsaw. Cybulski operates a small workshop where he engraves music onto copper plates and prints sheet music for sale. Most of what he publishes is simple: dances for social occasions, popular songs, teaching pieces. But when he sees the Polonaise by the 7-year-old Chopin, he is intrigued. He agrees to publish it. The title page reads, "Polonaise in G minor for pianoforte, dedicated to Her Excellency Countess Victoria Skarbek, by Frédéric Chopin, aged 8 years." The age is actually 7, but somewhere in the process, a year is added. Perhaps it is a misunderstanding. Perhaps Cybulski thinks 8 sounds more impressive than 7. In any case, the piece is published, the first Chopin composition to appear in print. The publication creates a small sensation. A 7-year-old child has written music that is not merely competent, but genuinely musical. The piece circulates among Warsaw's musical community. People play it in their salons, they marvel, and they ask, "Who is this child?" The Warsaw newspapers take notice. Pamiętnik Warszawski, the Warsaw Journal, publishes a review in January 1818. The article lists musical works published the previous year, and when it comes to Chopin's Polonaise, the reviewer writes, "The composer of this Polish dance, a young boy of 8, is a true musical genius. For not only does he play the most difficult pieces on the piano with the greatest of ease and with extraordinarily good taste, but he is also the composer of several dances and variations which constantly amaze the music experts." The boy becomes a celebrity in Warsaw's aristocratic salons. Invitations arrive. Would Master Chopin consent to perform at the Countess's? Soirée at the Prince's Musicale? The family hesitates at first. They do not want to exploit their son. They do not want him to become a performing monkey, trotted out for the amusement of the wealthy. But they also recognize that these opportunities are valuable. They introduce Frédéric to society. They create connections. And they provide a kind of education that no school can offer. The education of moving in cultured circles, of observing how educated people behave, of learning the unspoken rules of social grace. So they accept some invitations, not all, but enough. And Frédéric, dressed in his best clothes, a velvet jacket, breeches, white stockings, sits at grand pianos in grand houses and plays. He plays Mozart variations. He plays his own Polonaise. He improvises on themes suggested by the audience, and the ladies marvel at his delicate touch. The gentlemen are impressed by his poise. He is called Little Chopin, Chopinek in Polish, a diminutive that conveys both affection and slightly patronizing wonder. Comparisons are made to the young Mozart. Mozart, too, had been a child prodigy. Mozart, too, had toured Europe's courts, astonishing aristocrats with his precocious gifts. Could this Polish boy be another Mozart? The question is asked seriously, not just as flattery. There is genuine curiosity, genuine hope. Poland has produced many talented musicians. But a genius, a true genius who might join the ranks of the immortals, that would be something. But the Chopins are cautious. They remember what happened to Mozart. Paraded across Europe as a child, worked relentlessly, his health damaged by constant travel, dying at 35, buried in a pauper's grave. They do not want that for their son. So they protect him. They limit his appearances. They ensure he has time to simply be a child, to play with his sisters, to run in the garden, to draw pictures, to read stories. And crucially, they ensure he has summers away from Warsaw. In 1817, the Chopin family begins spending summers at Żelazowa Wola, returning to the countryside where Frédéric was born. The ostensible reason is health. Doctor's orders, they say. The boy needs fresh air, good food, the healthful influence of nature. Even then, even at 7, his constitution is delicate. He catches colds easily. He tires more quickly than other children. The damp Warsaw winters leave him pale and coughing. So the summers are prescribed as medicine. Return to the countryside. Let the child breathe clean air. Let him run in meadows. Let him eat fresh vegetables from the garden and drink milk still warm from the cow. The Skarbek estate at Żelazowa Wola is not merely a house. It is a working agricultural enterprise. There are fields of rye and wheat that stretch to the horizon. There are pastures where cattle graze. There are vegetable gardens tended by peasant women who sing as they work, their voices carrying across the flat Mazovian landscape. There are orchards where pear and apple trees bloom in spring and bear fruit in autumn. There are barns and stables and storage buildings. And there is the manor house itself, comfortable and solid, built to last generations. For young Frédéric, these summers are paradise. He is free from the formality of Warsaw, free from performing for aristocratic audiences, free to simply exist as a child. He plays with his sisters in the garden. They make up games, act out stories, build forts from fallen branches. He learns to ride a horse. Not well, he is never athletic, but adequately. He learns to swim in the small stream that runs through the property. He learns the names of birds and flowers from the gardener who tends the estate. And most importantly, he encounters the authentic music of the Polish countryside. This is not the refined music of Warsaw salons. This is not Mozart or Haydn carefully performed on well-tuned pianos. This is something older, something that predates written music, that lives in the throats and fingers of people who cannot read notes, but who carry centuries of tradition in their bodies. At the manor houses where Nicholas tutors, at neighboring estates where the Chopins are invited for celebrations, Frédéric hears village musicians. At harvest festivals, when the last sheaf of grain is brought in from the fields, there is music and dancing that lasts until dawn. At weddings, when entire villages gather to celebrate, there are musicians who play fiddles and small bagpipes and drums. And always, there is dancing. The mazurka, the kujawiak, the oberek. These are the dances of Poland. Each has its own character, its own rhythm, its own mood. The mazurka is the most versatile, sometimes slow and stately, sometimes fast and wild. It is in triple meter, 3 beats to a bar, but the accent shifts. Sometimes it falls on the second beat, sometimes on the third. Never predictable, always slightly off balance, which gives the dance its characteristic lilt. Frédéric watches the dancers. He watches how they move, how their feet strike the ground on unexpected beats, how they spin and stamp and leap. And he listens to the music. The melodies move in modes that are neither major nor minor, but something else, something modal, drawing on scales that predate the modern major-minor system. The harmonies are simple, sometimes just a drone, a single note sustained underneath the melody. But the melodies themselves are intricate, ornamented, expressive. The village fiddlers do not play from sheet music. They learn by ear, sitting beside older musicians, absorbing the tradition by osmosis. They know hundreds of melodies, tunes passed down through generations, each one slightly different from village to village, each performance slightly different from the last. There is no concept of a definitive version. The music is alive, fluid, constantly changing, and Frédéric absorbs all of this. He sits in corners at village celebrations and watches. He listens. He asks the musicians to play certain tunes again. He goes to the piano the next day and tries to recreate what he heard, not to copy it exactly, but to capture its spirit, to translate the wild, raw energy of village dancing into something that can be played on a piano in a Warsaw salon. Later, when he composes his own mazurkas, he will not simply imitate these folk dances. That would be condescending, a city composer playing at being rustic. Instead, he will transform them into art. He will take the rhythmic complexity, the modal scales, the folk melodies, and he will refine them, sophisticate them, make them his own. But the seed is planted here, in these childhood summers, listening to musicians who cannot read notes, but who carry centuries of tradition in their fingers. He also encounters folk songs. The peasant women who work in the gardens sing as they weed and plant and harvest. Old songs passed down from mother to daughter. Songs about lost love, about cruel landlords, about soldiers who never came home from wars. Songs about the changing seasons, about saints' days, about local legends. The melodies are simple but haunting. The lyrics are in Polish, but often an old Polish, with archaic words and expressions that even Nicholas does not fully understand. One summer, perhaps 1824, when Frédéric is 14, he stays at Szafárnia, an estate in the Kujawi region. He writes humorous letters home in the style of a newspaper, calling them the Szafárnia Courier. These letters are filled with descriptions of rural life. He describes peasant weddings. He describes harvest celebrations. He describes the local musicians with affection and humor. And underneath the humor, there is genuine engagement. He is not mocking these people. He is genuinely interested in their music, their traditions, their way of life. Years later, in Paris, when he is famous and surrounded by aristocrats who have never been outside a city, someone asks him about Polish folk music. And Chopin will speak about it with passion and precision. He will explain the differences between a mazurka and an oberek. He will sing folk melodies from memory. He will defend the sophistication of peasant music against those who dismiss it as primitive. Because he knows better. He heard it in its authentic form. He danced to it. He absorbed it into his being. And it became part of who he is as a composer. By 1821, when Frédéric is 11, Givny admits that the student has surpassed the teacher. The boy's technique is now beyond what Givny can refine. His imagination has grown beyond what any lessons can direct. Givny has taught him all he can. As a parting gift, Frédéric composes a polonaise in A-flat major and dedicates it to Givny. It is a gesture of gratitude and affection. Givny will treasure it. Years later, in exile, Chopin will write to his family from Vienna and mention his old teacher with warmth. "No one here wishes to take me for a pupil." Blahetka said that he is surprised by nothing so much as by how I learned this in Warsaw. But before Givny departs from Frédéric's life, one more significant event occurs. In 1825, Tsar Alexander I comes to Warsaw to officially open the Polish parliament, the Sejm. It is a ceremonial occasion. The Tsar wishes to project benevolence. He wishes to show that Russian rule is enlightened. A concert is arranged. An 11-year-old Frédéric Chopin is invited to perform. He plays on a peculiar instrument called an elopantalon, a hybrid of piano and organ, invented by a Warsaw craftsman named Józef Długosz. The Tsar is impressed. After the performance, he presents Frédéric with a diamond ring. It is a strange moment. A Polish child receives a gift from the Russian emperor who controls his homeland. Frédéric accepts with politeness. But even then, even at 11, one wonders what he truly feels. Does he see the Tsar as generous or as the face of occupation? That question will haunt the rest of his life. In 1823, Frédéric begins attending the Warsaw Lyceum where his father teaches. He studies literature, Latin, French, German. He draws and sketches. He has a talent for caricature. He writes poetry. He is witty, observant, sometimes melancholy. He makes close friends, particularly Titus Wojciechowski, who will become a lifelong correspondent. But music remains his focus. In 1826, at 16, he enrolls in the Warsaw Conservatory. His teacher is Józef Elsner, composer, conductor, founder of the conservatory itself. Elsner is a disciplined academic, but he is also wise enough to recognize that some students cannot be molded to convention. Elsner teaches Frédéric harmony, counterpoint, composition. He assigns exercises. He analyzes classical forms. He explains the rules that govern musical structure, and Frédéric learns these rules. But Elsner quickly realizes that this student's imagination moves in directions that textbooks cannot predict. In his teaching notes, Elsner writes something remarkable. He comments that Chopin's style is too original to force into traditional patterns. Instead of trying to reshape the young composer, Elsner gives him freedom to develop along his own lines. It is an act of pedagogical courage. Lesser teachers would have tried to correct Chopin's unconventional harmonies, his unusual phrase structures, his refusal to resolve tension in expected ways. Elsner encourages these tendencies. During his conservatory years, Chopin composes prolifically. He writes sets of mazurkas, drawing on the folk music he heard in childhood, but transforming it into something sophisticated and deeply personal. He writes nocturnes, inspired by the Irish composer John Field, but making the form his own. He writes polonaises that combine national pride with complex musical architecture, and he falls in love. Her name is Konstancja Gładkowska. She is a soprano studying voice at the same conservatory. She is the daughter of the commander of Warsaw Castle. She is beautiful. She has blue eyes and a lovely voice. And Frédéric, shy and romantic, adores her from a distance. He never speaks his feelings directly. He is too reserved, too self-conscious. But his music speaks for him. The slow movement of his piano concerto in F minor is dedicated to her, though she may never know it. The entire piano concerto in A minor is composed with her in mind. The music is full of longing, tender, passionate, melancholy. It is the work of a young man deeply, hopelessly in love. When he plays these concertos in Warsaw, Konstancja is in the audience. What does she hear? Does she recognize herself in the music? We will never know. But the music endures, and listeners still hear the ache in those melodies. In 1829, Chopin makes his first journey abroad. He travels to Vienna, the musical capital of Europe. He gives 2 concerts, playing his variations on Mozart's Lasci darem la mano, and his piano concerto in F minor. The Viennese audiences are enthusiastic. Critics praise his delicate touch, his poetic sensibility. They call him a genius. But Vienna is also daunting. The city is full of virtuoso pianists, showmen who astonish audiences with speed and power. Chopin's style is different. He does not pound the keys. He coaxes music from them. His playing is intimate, nuanced, almost conversational. It enchants those who listen closely, but it does not always command large concert halls. He returns to Warsaw, celebrated but uncertain. What is his path forward? Should he stay in Poland and build a career in Warsaw, or should he venture out into the wider world? The decision is made for him by history. In November of 1830, Poland erupts. For years, discontent has been building. Russian control has grown more oppressive. Tsar Nicholas I, who succeeded Alexander, is an absolutist. He does not tolerate dissent. He has curtailed Polish autonomy. The Polish army, theoretically independent, is under Russian command. Young Polish officers resent this. Students and intellectuals dream of true independence. And finally, the tension explodes. On November 29, 1830, Polish cadets attacked the Belvedere Palace in Warsaw, attempting to assassinate the Russian viceroy, Grand Duke Constantine. The attempt fails, but it ignites a full-scale uprising. The November Uprising, as it will be called, is a desperate gamble. Can Poland break free from Russian domination? Frédéric Chopin is 20 years old. His friends are joining the resistance. Titus Wojciechowski is preparing to fight. Others are arming themselves. There is talk of foreign support. Perhaps France will help. Perhaps Britain. Perhaps this time Poland will regain its freedom. But Chopin's parents and mentors persuade him to leave. His health is too fragile for military service. His talent is too precious to risk. He must go abroad, build his career, and carry Polish music to the world. If the uprising succeeds, he can return in triumph. If it fails, well, at least he will be safe. On November 2nd, 1830, 1 week before the uprising begins, Frédéric Chopin leaves Warsaw. He does not know he will never see his homeland again. He travels with Titus Wojciechowski, heading first to Breslau, then to Vienna. In Vienna, they wait for news. For a while, the news is hopeful. The Poles are fighting bravely. They have won some victories. Perhaps the impossible is possible. But by the summer of 1831, the truth becomes clear. The uprising has failed. Russian forces, vastly superior in number and equipment, have crushed the Polish resistance. Warsaw has fallen. The reprisals are brutal. Thousands are executed. Thousands more are exiled to Siberia. Polish autonomy is abolished. The Kingdom of Poland becomes, in effect, a Russian province. Chopin is in Stuttgart when he learns the news. He is devastated. His journal entries from this time are wrenching. He writes about his despair, his guilt at being safe while his friends suffer, his rage at the injustice, and he sits at the piano. And out of his anguish comes music. The Etude in C minor, Opus 10, number 12, will later be called the Revolutionary Etude. It is a torrent of emotion. The left hand churns like a storm. The right hand cries out in defiance and despair. It is not programmatic music in the literal sense. Chopin does not write a story, but everyone who hears it feels the fury and the grief. Poland is gone. Chopin is now an exile. He will never see his mother again. He will never return to Warsaw. He will carry his homeland inside him for the rest of his life. and he will transform that loss into art. In September 1831, Frédéric Chopin arrives in Paris. He is 21 years old. He is alone. He has very little money, perhaps a few hundred francs, enough for a few weeks' rent and food, but not much more. He does not speak French well. His father was French, yes, but the household language was Polish. Chopin can read French, can understand it when spoken slowly, but his spoken French is heavily accented, grammatically uncertain. He will work on it. He will improve. But in those first weeks, the language barrier is real and frustrating. Paris in the autumn of 1831 is a city of contrasts. It is magnificent and filthy, sophisticated and brutal, beautiful and terrifying. The population is approaching 900,000, making it one of the largest cities in Europe. The streets are narrow, crowded, perpetually muddy. Horse-drawn carriages clatter over cobblestones. Street vendors call out their wares. Beggars sit in doorways. The smell is overwhelming. Horse manure and human waste, rotting vegetables and coal smoke, perfume and wine and unwashed bodies all mixed together. But it is also the cultural heart of Europe. The July Revolution of 1830 has just replaced the conservative king Charles X with the more liberal Louis Philippe, the so-called citizen king, who claims to represent the bourgeoisie rather than the old aristocracy. The revolution was relatively bloodless. 3 days of barricades and fighting, then it was over. But it signaled change. France is no longer the France of the Bourbons. It is something new, something modern, something that attracts artists and intellectuals and revolutionaries from across Europe. The theaters are full. The opera performs nightly. The Comédie Française presents classics by Molière and Racine, alongside new plays by Victor Hugo. The cafes of the Latin Quarter buzz with conversation and debate. Newspapers proliferate, some royalist, some republican, some socialist, all arguing passionately about the future of France and Europe. Printing presses run day and night. New books appear constantly. New ideas circulate freely. It is exhilarating and exhausting. And everywhere there are exiles. Germans fleeing Prussian repression, Italians fleeing Austrian control, Irish fleeing British rule, and Poles, thousands of Poles, fleeing the Russian crackdown after the failed November uprising. They arrive in Paris with nothing. Some are former soldiers still wearing remnants of uniforms. Some are aristocrats who escaped with family jewels sewn into their clothes. Some are intellectuals and artists, carrying only their talents and their determination to survive. The French government, to its credit, provides some support. There is an official fund for Polish refugees. They receive modest stipends, enough to avoid starvation. They are given temporary housing. They are allowed to work. Paris becomes the unofficial capital of the Polish diaspora, the place where Polish culture survives in exile, where Polish patriots plan for a future restoration of independence that may never come. Chopin arrives in this chaotic, energetic, overwhelming city with letters of introduction from friends in Vienna. These letters are crucial. They open doors. They provide connections. One letter introduces him to Ferdinand Paër, an Italian composer who is director of music at the court of Louis Philippe. Another introduces him to Friedrich Kalkbrenner, one of the most famous pianists in Paris, known for his crystalline technique and aristocratic bearing. Another introduces him to Rodolphe Kreutzer, a violin virtuoso and composer whose name is immortalized in Beethoven's Kreutzer Sonata. With these letters, Chopin begins making the rounds. He visits Pierre's apartment. He is received politely but without enthusiasm. Pierre is busy. He has many people seeking his patronage. A young Polish pianist is not particularly interesting to him. He wishes Chopin well. That is all. He visits Kalkbrenner. This meeting is more consequential. Kalkbrenner is in his 40s, at the height of his fame. He is wealthy, successful, confident. He has a piano manufactory that produces instruments for sale. He teaches the sons and daughters of the very rich. He concertizes rarely, only for special occasions and enormous fees. When Chopin plays for him, Kalkbrenner listens with attention. He recognizes talent, real talent, but he also hears technical deficiencies. Chopin's hand position is unorthodox, his fingering sometimes awkward, his tone production inconsistent. Kalkbrenner makes an offer. He will take Chopin as a student, 3 years of study. At the end, Chopin will have the technique to succeed as a concert pianist. He will play like Kalkbrenner himself, flawless, polished, professional. The cost will be moderate. Kalkbrenner's fee for lessons, but discounted because he sees potential. Chopin is tempted. Kalkbrenner is famous. To study with him would be an honor. It might open doors. It might lead to a career. But Chopin also senses danger. 3 years of study means 3 years of being reshaped in Kalkbrenner's image. 3 years of learning to play like someone else. 3 years during which his own voice, already formed, already distinctive, might be compromised or lost. He writes to his former teacher, Joseph Elsner, in Warsaw. He describes the offer. He asks for advice. Elsner's response is unequivocal. Do not do it. You are already a mature artist. You do not need to be remolded. You need to find your own path. Trust your instincts. Trust your gift. Chopin declines Kalkbrenner's offer. It is a difficult decision, but it is the right one. He rents a small apartment, first on the Rue de la Cité, near Notre Dame. It is tiny. One room with a sloped ceiling, a narrow bed, a table and chair, a washstand, no piano. He cannot afford a piano. He must go to friends' apartments or to piano showrooms to practice. The walls are thin. He can hear his neighbors arguing, making love, coughing through sleepless nights. The building smells of cabbage and damp plaster, but the rent is cheap, and it is his. He begins giving piano lessons. This is the standard way for musicians to survive in Paris, teaching aristocratic children who have more money than talent. It is tedious work. The students are often lazy or uninterested. They do not practice. They make the same mistakes week after week. Their parents pay well, but they expect flattery, expect their children to be praised even when they deserve criticism. Chopin bites his tongue. He needs the money. He also begins composing seriously. The pieces he writes in these first Paris years are extraordinary. The Etudes of Opus 10, which he completes and publishes in 1833, are unlike anything in the piano literature. Previous composers wrote etudes, studies, as technical exercises for students. Czerny's etudes, Kramer's etudes, useful for developing technique but musically dull. Chopin writes etudes that are fiendishly difficult, designed to develop specific aspects of piano playing. But they are also beautiful, expressive, complete musical statements. Each is a miniature tone poem. The Etude in C minor, Opus 10, number 12. The revolutionary etude he composed in Stuttgart upon learning of Warsaw's fall is published as part of this set. So is the Etude in E major, with its shimmering right-hand figurations over a singing melody in the left. So is the Black Key Etude in G-flat major, where the right hand plays entirely on black keys while the left provides support. So is the Waterfall Etude in A-flat major, with its cascading arpeggios that seem to tumble endlessly. These pieces announce a new voice in music. Reviewers are puzzled. Are these etudes or concert pieces? Are they pedagogical or artistic? The answer, of course, is both. They are perfect examples of Chopin's genius for combining utility and beauty, for making technical challenges inseparable from musical expression. He also begins work on his Ballade in G minor. This will become one of his most famous works, but it takes years to complete. He sketches ideas. He experiments with form. He is inventing a new genre, the piano ballade, music that tells a story without words, that creates narrative arc through purely musical means. There are hints that he is inspired by the poetry of Adam Mickiewicz, the great Polish Romantic poet also living in exile in Paris. Specifically, by Mickiewicz's ballad Konrad Wallenrod, about a Lithuanian hero who infiltrates the Teutonic Knights to destroy them from within. But Chopin never confirms this. He lets the music speak for itself. He meets Polish immigrants at various gatherings. They congregate in certain cafes and boarding houses, keeping their language and traditions alive. Prince Adam Jerzy Czartoryski, the elderly statesman who once served as Russia's foreign minister before turning against the Tsar, holds court in Paris. He runs an unofficial Polish government in exile. Young Polish intellectuals and former soldiers gather around him, planning, hoping, dreaming of a restored Poland. Chopin attends some of these gatherings, but he is not political in the usual sense. He is not organizing resistance or plotting uprisings. His contribution to Poland will be through music, through carrying Polish culture to the world. And slowly, very slowly, he begins to build a reputation. Word spreads among Paris's musical community. There is a young Polish pianist of extraordinary talent. He plays privately for friends. His compositions are being published. He is someone to watch. In February 1832, arrangements are made for Chopin's first major Paris concert. It takes place at the Salle Pleyel, a concert hall owned by the piano manufacturer Camille Pleyel. The program includes Chopin's Piano Concerto in A minor, which he had written in Warsaw years earlier, as well as several solo pieces. The orchestra is adequate. The hall is well attended. Critics from major newspapers are present. The concert is a success. Reviewers praise Chopin's delicacy, his refinement, his poetic sensibility. François-Joseph Fétis, the influential music critic, writes favorably. But there are also notes of reservation. Some feel his playing is too quiet, too intimate for a large hall. Some are puzzled by his compositions. Are they too unconventional, too harmonically adventurous? The Parisian audience is accustomed to the thundering virtuosity of pianists like Liszt and Kalkbrenner. Chopin offers something entirely different. Not everyone understands what to make of it. After the concert, Chopin realizes something important. He realizes that he does not want to be a touring concert pianist. The preparation exhausts him. The performance itself drains him. The anxiety beforehand makes him ill, and frankly, his delicate, nuanced playing, so perfect for intimate settings, does not always fill a large concert hall effectively. The audiences who have grown accustomed to pianistic fireworks, to displays of speed and power that astonish through sheer technical prowess. Find Chopin's subtlety perplexing. He will give fewer than 30 public concerts in his entire life. He will never tour extensively. He will never become a popular concert artist in the conventional sense. But there is another path, and it is a path that will suit him much better. Through connections, Chopin is introduced to the Rothschild family, the legendary bankers whose wealth and influence span Europe. They are cultured, they host magnificent salons, and they are looking for fashionable entertainers. Chopin's elegant manners, his refined playing, his ability to charm with intimate performances. These qualities are perfect for the Rothschild salons. An introduction to one wealthy family leads to introductions to others. Soon, Chopin is performing regularly in the grand houses of Paris. The aristocracy adores him. He is exotic, a Polish exile with sad, soulful eyes. He is talented, a composer of real genius, and he is perfect for their drawing rooms, playing nocturnes and waltzes for audiences who sit close enough to hear every nuance. This success brings financial security. Piano lessons become lucrative. Chopin charges high fees, 1 guinea per hour, a substantial sum, and wealthy students line up. He can afford better lodgings. He can dress fashionably. He can move in the circles where art and money intersect. He also becomes part of Paris's artistic community. He meets Franz Liszt, the Hungarian pianist whose virtuosity is legendary. They become friends, though the friendship is complicated. Liszt is everything Chopin is not: flamboyant, athletic, magnetic on stage. But Liszt genuinely admires Chopin's compositions. He plays them in his own concerts. He promotes them. Chopin meets Hector Berlioz, the revolutionary composer whose Symphonie Fantastique shocked audiences. He meets Felix Mendelssohn, the German composer who will conduct the premieres of some of Chopin's orchestral works. He meets Heinrich Heine, the German Jewish poet whose wit and melancholy resonate with Chopin's own sensibility. He meets the painter Eugène Delacroix, whose use of color inspires Chopin's harmonic imagination. Paris in the 1830s is a romantic wonderland. Artists believe in individual genius, in emotional truth, in breaking old rules and creating new forms. Chopin fits perfectly. His compositions are revolutionary in their own quiet way. His nocturnes create a new kind of intimacy. His mazurkas elevate folk dance to high art. His ballades. He essentially invents the genre of the piano ballade, tell stories without words, creating narrative arcs through purely musical means. The etudes of Opus 10, composed during these years, are miracles of invention. Previous composers wrote etudes as technical exercises for students. Chopin writes etudes that are also concert pieces. They are fiendishly difficult, designed to develop specific aspects of technique. But they are also beautiful, expressive, complete musical statements. The Waterfall Etude, the Black Key Etude, the Revolutionary Etude. Each is a miniature masterpiece. His ballades are even more ambitious. The Ballade in G minor, Opus 23, composed between 1831 and 1835, is a sprawling emotional journey. It begins with an enigmatic, questioning phrase. It builds through dramatic contrasts, moments of lyricism and violence, tenderness and rage. It ends in a fury of octaves. Listeners sense a story, though Chopin never provides a program. There are suggestions that it was inspired by the poetry of Adam Mickiewicz, the great Polish romantic poet in exile. But Chopin never confirms this. The music speaks for itself. During these years, Chopin's personal life remains complicated. He has romantic attachments that come to nothing. In 1835, he visits his parents in Carlsbad and meets Maria Wodzinska, a young Polish woman whose family his parents know. They fall in love. He proposes. She accepts. But Maria's mother is concerned about Chopin's fragile health. Letters are exchanged. Eventually, quietly, the engagement is called off. Chopin is heartbroken. He keeps Maria's letters for the rest of his life, tied with a ribbon and marked Moja Bieda, my sorrow. And then, in 1836, at a salon hosted by Marie Dagout, Liszt's mistress, Chopin meets a woman who will change his life, a woman unlike any he has ever encountered, a woman whose very name is a challenge to convention, George Sand. Her real name is Aurore Dudevant. Born Aurore Dupin, she married Baron Casimir Dudevant in an unhappy union that produced 2 children and ended in a scandalous separation. She won custody of her children through a dramatic legal battle. She moved to Paris. She became a writer, and she adopted a male pseudonym, George Sand, both to circumvent the prejudice against female authors and to claim a kind of freedom that society denied women. By 1836, George Sand is famous. Her novels explore themes of love, freedom, social justice, and female autonomy. They challenge the institution of marriage. They defend passion and authentic emotion. They outrage conservatives and inspire progressives. Sand herself lives her principles. She dresses in men's clothing, trousers, coats, top hats. She smokes cigars. She takes lovers openly. She is 6 years older than Chopin, worldly and confident where he is shy and reserved. When they first meet at Marie Dagout's salon, Chopin is reportedly unimpressed. According to some accounts, he asks Liszt afterward, "Is she really a woman?" He finds her manner coarse, her appearance off-putting. But Sand is intrigued by this delicate, melancholy Polish composer. She sees something in him that touches her. She decides she wants to know him better. It takes time. Through 1837 and into 1838, they move in the same circles, meet at various gatherings, gradually become friends. Sand's persistence is patient but purposeful. Chopin's reserve slowly softens. He begins to appreciate her intelligence, her warmth beneath the provocative exterior, her genuine passion for art and justice. By the summer of 1838, they have become lovers. It is an unlikely pairing. She is bold and physical. He is refined and fragile. She dominates social situations. He prefers quiet corners. She writes novels about free love and social revolution. He composes nocturnes about longing and loss. Yet something draws them together. Perhaps she offers him maternal protection. Perhaps he offers her spiritual refinement. Perhaps they simply love each other despite their differences. In the autumn of 1838, Sand proposes a plan. Her son Maurice has been ill with rheumatism. Chopin's own health, always delicate, has been worsening. He coughs frequently. He tires easily. The cold, damp Parisian winter is bad for his lungs. Why not escape to somewhere warm, somewhere sunny, somewhere they can all recuperate? Sand suggests Majorca, the Spanish island in the Mediterranean. It will be a paradise, sunshine and blue sea, fresh air and simple food. Chopin can compose. She can write. The children can recover their health. It will be wonderful. Chopin agrees. In November 1838, they depart. Sand, her 2 children, Maurice and Solange, and Chopin. They travel to Barcelona, then take a ship to Palma, Majorca's capital. They arrive full of hope and excitement. The hope lasts about 3 weeks. At first, Majorca seems as promised. The sky is turquoise. The sea is azure. Orange and lemon trees perfume the air. The weather is mild. Chopin writes to his friend Julian Fontana in Paris. The sky is like turquoise, the sea like emeralds, the air as in heaven. Sand writes to her friend Carlotta Marliani with similar enthusiasm. The nature, the trees, the sky, the sea, the monuments surpass all my dreams. This is the promised land. They rent a villa called Son Vent near Palma. It is picturesque but inconvenient. And almost immediately problems begin. First, Chopin's Pleo piano, shipped from Paris, is held up by Spanish customs. The officials demand an exorbitant fee to release it. Days pass. Chopin has no instrument on which to compose. He borrows a rickety local piano that is barely in tune. Then the weather changes. Majorca's winters, despite the generally mild climate, can be rainy and damp. Heavy rains begin. The walls of Son Vent grow wet. The rooms become cold and clammy. And Chopin begins to cough. Not just the mild cough he has always had. A deep, rattling cough. Blood appears on his handkerchief. Sand calls for doctors. They examine Chopin and exchange worried looks. Tuberculosis, they say, or at least they suspect it. In 1838, tuberculosis is a death sentence. There is no cure, no effective treatment, only rest and hope. But when word spreads that the visitor might have tuberculosis, the landlord of Son Vent panics. Tuberculosis is contagious. He wants them out immediately. Sand is furious. She argues. She pleads. It does no good. They are evicted. Now they must find new lodgings, and no one in Palma wants to rent to a possibly consumptive foreigner and his scandalous unmarried partner. Eventually, Sand finds a solution, or what she hopes is a solution. In the mountain village of Valdemosa, about 15 kilometers from Palma, there is an abandoned Carthusian monastery. After the monks were expelled during Spain's secularization of church properties, the building stands mostly empty. Some of the cells can be rented cheaply. It is remote, high in the mountains, but the air might be good for Chopin. The price is affordable. In mid-December 1838, they moved to Valdemosa. Chopin describes their new home in a letter to Julian Fontana. Between the rocks and the ocean, a huge, vacated Carthusian monastery, where in a single cell you can find me with uncut hair, without white gloves, pale as usual. The cell has the shape of a tall tomb, enormous vaulting, dusty, small windows. In front of the window, oranges, palms, and cypress trees grow. My trestle bed opposite the window. Bach, my scribbles, and not my papers. Quiet. You can shout. It's still quiet. In a nutshell, I'm writing to you from this strange place. It is both beautiful and terrible. The monastery is atmospheric, almost Gothic. The mountains are dramatic. The views are stunning. But the cells are cold. The stone walls hold the damp. Chopin's cough worsens. He grows weaker. And the local Majorcans are hostile. Sand does not attend Catholic Mass. Chopin is clearly ill. They are foreigners living in sin. Rumors spread. The villagers refuse to sell them food at reasonable prices. Some spit when they pass. Sand must travel to Palma with a handcart to buy basic provisions. And yet, Chopin composes. Through all the misery, through the illness and isolation, he composes. His Pleo piano finally arrives in early January, released after Sand pays half the demanded customs fee. And with the instrument finally at hand, Chopin works. He completes most of the 24 preludes, Opus 28. These are miniature masterpieces, each exploring a different key, a different mood, a different musical idea. Some last less than a minute. Others are longer, more developed. Together, they form a complete emotional landscape. The famous Prelude in E minor is perhaps the most harmonically daring piece Chopin has yet written. The so-called Raindrop Prelude in D-flat major, Prelude number 15, features a repeated A-flat in the left hand that sounds like water dripping from the monastery's eaves. There is debate about how much of the preludes were actually composed in Majorca versus completed there. But the atmosphere of Valdemosa certainly infuses the music. There's a sense of isolation, of beauty tinged with melancholy, of light and shadow in equal measure. He also works on other pieces. He revises his Ballade number 2 in F major. He composes 2 polonaises, Opus 40. He works on his Scherzo number 3. Despite everything, despite the cold and damp and illness and hostility, his creativity flows. But the situation is unsustainable. By February 1839, it is clear that Chopin will not survive another month in Valdemosa. His health is critical. He can barely walk. Sand makes arrangements to leave. The departure is a nightmare. Chopin is so weak, he must be carried. They make their way down the mountain to Palma, then find passage on a ship to Barcelona. The voyage is difficult. The ship carries livestock, pigs in the hold. The smell is nauseating. Chopin lies on deck, wrapped in blankets, coughing blood. Sand tends to him with fierce devotion. When they finally reach Barcelona, they go immediately to a doctor. Then they continue to Marseille in the south of France, where Chopin can receive proper medical care. The winter in Majorca is over. Sand will later write a book about the experience, Un hiver a Majorque, A Winter in Majorca. Her account is scathing. She portrays the Majorcans as ignorant, bigoted, and greedy. The book causes a scandal and damages Majorca's reputation for years. But whatever the fairness of Sand's account, one thing is clear: the trip was a disaster for Chopin's health. And yet, artistically, it was extraordinarily productive. From Marseille, after weeks of recovery, they traveled to Sand's country estate at Nohant in central France. And there, finally, Chopin finds a place of peace. Nohant is a substantial manor house in the Berry region, about 250 kilometers south of Paris. It belonged to Sand's grandmother and passed to Sand after her mother's death. The house is elegant without being ostentatious. Spacious rooms filled with books and art, a garden with flowering trees, meadows and woods beyond. It is quiet, rural, removed from the pressures of Paris. Beginning in 1839 and continuing through 1846, Chopin and Sand establish a pattern. They spend winters in Paris, living in adjacent apartments in the Square d'Orléans near the Rue Taitbout. Chopin gives lessons. Sand works on her novels. They socialize with artists and intellectuals. But summers and early autumns belong to Nohant. At Nohant, Chopin finds the conditions he needs to compose. He has his own rooms, a good piano, no students to interrupt, no concerts to prepare, no social obligations beyond occasional visits from friends. The days are long and quiet. He sleeps late. He works when inspiration strikes. He plays for Sand and her children in the evenings. These years at Nohant are the most productive of Chopin's life. He composes some of his greatest works here. The 4 ballades, all completed during this period. The Piano Sonata No. 2 in B-flat minor Opus 35, which includes the famous Funeral March. The Piano Sonata No. 3 in B minor, Opus 58, a monumental work of rare perfection. The Fantaisie in F minor, Opus 49, one of his most harmonically adventurous pieces. The Barcarolle in F-sharp major, Opus 60, a shimmering evocation of Venetian gondoliers. The Polonaise Fantaisie in A-flat major, Opus 61, which stretches the Polonaise form into something almost unrecognizable, almost symphonic in scope. He continues writing mazurkas, each set exploring new harmonic territories, pushing the boundaries of tonality while maintaining the dance's essential character. He writes waltzes of exquisite polish and grace. He writes nocturnes that sing with a human voice, exploiting the piano's cantabile possibilities in ways no composer had before. At Nohant, Chopin is surrounded by warmth and care. Sand manages the household. She protects his time. She ensures he eats properly, though his appetite is always poor. She organizes entertainments, theatrical performances involving her children and guests, puppet shows, charades. The painter Eugène Delacroix visits and paints. The singer Pauline Viardot comes and sings. Chopin accompanies her, and they discuss music and art late into the evening. Sand's children, Maurice and Solange, are part of the household dynamic. Maurice, Sand's son, grows into a talented artist. He paints and sketches. He and Chopin get along well in the early years. Solange, Sand's daughter, is more complicated. She is beautiful, strong-willed, often difficult. As she grows from girl to woman, tensions develop. But in the early Nohant years, there is genuine family feeling. Chopin's relationship with Sand during these years is complex and evolving. At first, it is clearly romantic and physical. But as Chopin's health declines, the dynamic shifts. Sand becomes more maternal. She calls him her third child. She tends to him when he is ill, which is increasingly frequent. She protects him from stress and upheaval. Some biographers have speculated that the physical aspect of their relationship diminished or ended as Chopin grew sicker. This seems likely, though neither of them left explicit accounts. What is clear is that Sand's devotion remained strong. She genuinely loved him in whatever form that love took, and she provided him with something he desperately needed: stability, safety, a home. But nothing lasts forever. And by the mid-1840s, cracks begin to appear. The erosion of Chopin and Sand's relationship happens gradually, like a riverbank slowly crumbling. There is no single dramatic moment, but rather an accumulation of small tensions, misunderstandings, resentments. Chopin's health is part of the problem. He is often irritable when ill. He retreats into silence. He becomes fixated on small details, obsessing over perceived slights. Sand finds this exhausting. She has a novel to write, a household to manage, children to raise. She cannot spend all her energy managing Chopin's moods. The children are another source of friction. Maurice grows closer to his mother and more distant from Chopin. He resents Chopin's presence, seeing him as competition for Sand's attention. Solange, meanwhile, becomes rebellious. She quarrels with her mother constantly. In 1847, at age 19, she marries the sculptor Auguste Clésinger, a man Sand despises. The wedding is a disaster. There are bitter arguments. Accusations fly. Chopin, caught in the middle, takes Solange's side. Perhaps he sees in her rebellion some echo of his own thwarted spirit. Perhaps he simply feels Sand is being too harsh. Whatever the reason, his support of Solange infuriates Sand. She sees it as betrayal. In the summer of 1847, the relationship finally breaks. There is no dramatic confrontation, no screaming or throwing of objects, just a slow, painful realization that they can no longer live together. Sand writes to friends that the relationship has run its course. She describes it as a strange conclusion to 9 years of exclusive friendship. Chopin leaves Nohant and returns to Paris. He will never see George Sand again. They exchange no letters. When they pass each other by chance at a mutual friend's house in March 1848, they exchange only a brief, cold greeting. Sand asks about his health. He replies politely. And that is all. Chopin is devastated by the separation. He writes to family and friends about his sense of abandonment and loss. But he never speaks Sand's name again. When people ask, he changes the subject. The wound is too deep, and his health, already fragile, deteriorates rapidly without Sand's care. The winter of 1847 to 1848 is brutal. Paris is cold. Chopin has no one to manage his household. He teaches when he can, but often he is too ill. He composes very little. The spark seems to have gone out. Then, in February 1848, revolution erupts in Paris once again. The February Revolution overthrows King Louis-Philippe. The Second Republic is declared. Barricades fill the streets. Gunfire echoes through the city. Chopin's aristocratic students flee Paris. Lessons dry up. Income disappears. The city that was once his refuge has become dangerous and chaotic. It is at this desperate moment that Jane Stirling re-enters his life. Jane Wilhelmina. Stirling is a Scottish aristocrat, a descendant of the Stirlings of Keir, a clan whose fortune came from sugar plantations in the West Indies. She is unmarried, rumored to have rejected more than 30 marriage proposals. She is devout, proper, and utterly devoted to Chopin. She became his student around 1842 or 1843. She studied his most demanding works, the etudes, the fantaisie, the sonatas. She filled her scores with annotations in Chopin's hand, fingerings, pedaling, tempo indications. These scores will later become invaluable documents for understanding how Chopin taught and what he intended. Chopin dedicated 2 nocturnes, Opus 55, to her. But there is no evidence their relationship was ever romantic. She adored him. She may have hoped for more, but Chopin saw her as a friend and patron, nothing more. Later, when rumors spread that they were engaged, Chopin wrote to his family in frustration, "They have married me to Miss Stirling. She might as well marry death." But whatever Chopin's feelings, Jane Stirling's devotion is unquestionable. In early 1848, seeing his desperate situation, she proposes a plan. Come to Britain, give concerts. She will arrange everything. She will pay the expenses. Her family connections will ensure audiences of the highest quality. The trip will restore his finances and perhaps his spirits. Chopin, with little alternative, agrees. In April 1848, he travels to London. Stirling has arranged for him to stay in lodgings at Dover Street. The piano maker Broadwood provides him with a grand piano. On May 15th, he performs at Stafford House for an audience that includes Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The Queen is impressed. The Prince, himself a talented musician, moves close to the piano to watch Chopin's hands. Over the following months, Stirling arranges more concerts and private recitals. Chopin plays in the homes of aristocrats. He gives lessons at the high fee of 1 guinea per hour. Writers attend his performances. William Makepeace Thackeray is there. The singer Jenny Lind performs alongside him. Hector Berlioz, also in London, attends, and later writes about Chopin's playing with admiration. But London exhausts Chopin. The fog and coal smoke worsen his cough. The social obligations drain him. He must be charming at dinner parties when he wants only to sleep. The English audiences are polite but sometimes uncomprehending. They expect virtuoso displays. They do not always understand the intimacy of his music. In August, Sterling suggests they go to Scotland. Her relatives there will host them. The fresh air will do him good. Chopin agrees, though he is already exhausted. They travel north by train. Chopin, Sterling, her sister Catherine Erskine, and a small entourage. The journey takes 12 hours. In Scotland, they stay at a series of grand estates: Calder House, home of Lord Torphichen; Keir House in Perthshire, home of William Sterling; Johnstone Castle in Renfrewshire. At each stop, Chopin is expected to perform. He gives concerts in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Manchester. The audiences are enthusiastic. The reviews are positive. But Chopin is dying inside. He writes letters to friends in Paris. He describes the ordeal in exhausted, despairing terms. "I am being passed around like a rare object," he writes. He complains that he must play in cold, drafty halls, that he must dine with people who bore him, that he is too weak to stand for long. After his concert in Manchester on August 28th, he is so weak that someone must carry him off stage. In November, Chopin returns to London for one final public appearance. It is a charity concert at the Guildhall to raise money for Polish refugees. It takes place on November 16th, 1848. Chopin is so ill he can barely sit at the piano, but he plays mazurkas, nocturnes, waltzes. The audience listens in hushed reverence. They sense they are witnessing something final. It is his last public performance. He is 38 years old. On November 23rd, Chopin returns to Paris. He is carried off the train. Sterling helps him to an apartment she has rented for him at 12 Place Vendôme. It is a beautiful apartment, spacious and sunny, formerly housing the Russian embassy. Chopin cannot afford it. Sterling pays. And there, in that sunny apartment overlooking one of Paris's grandest squares, Frédéric Chopin begins to die. The winter of 1848 to 1849 is slow agony. Chopin can barely leave his bed. He gives a few piano lessons when he has strength, but not many. Friends visit. Musicians come to play for him. He drifts in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes delirious with fever. In June 1849, his sister Ludwika arrives from Warsaw with her husband and daughter. It is the first time Chopin has seen a family member in 19 years. Ludwika is shocked by his appearance. He is skeletal. His skin is gray. His breathing is labored. But his mind is still sharp. They talk about Warsaw, about their mother, about childhood memories. They do not talk about the fact that he is dying. Throughout the summer, Chopin's condition deteriorates. Multiple doctors are consulted. They prescribe various treatments, none effective. Tuberculosis, they agree, advanced and incurable. Some suggest other possibilities: cystic fibrosis, liver cirrhosis. But the effect is the same. Chopin's body is failing. Friends continue to visit. The pianist and composer Adolphe Gutmann comes often. He is devoted to Chopin. The cellist Auguste Franchomme, with whom Chopin wrote a grand duo concertant years earlier, comes to play for him. The Princess Marcelina Czartoryska visits. The Polish intellectual Wojciech Guszymawa is a constant presence. And Delfina Potocka comes. She is a Polish countess, a soprano with whom Chopin had a close, possibly romantic, relationship years earlier. She arrives from Nice in October. At Chopin's request, a piano is brought into his bedroom. Delfina sings. No one can remember later exactly what she sang. The emotion is too overwhelming. But her voice fills the room, and Chopin listens with tears on his face. On October 14th, Chopin has a moment of clarity. Adolf Gutmann is holding him, trying to ease his breathing during a coughing fit. When the fit subsides, Chopin speaks. "Now, I enter into agony." He says it calmly, with authority. It is a rare favor that God grants to man, to reveal to him the instant when agony begins. "This grace he has given me. Do not trouble me." The doctors are called. His closest friends gather. The apartment fills with people who love him. And Chopin, in and out of consciousness, murmurs something that those present will remember forever. "She told me I would not die except in her arms." He is speaking of George Sand. She is not there. She will not come. She does not even know he is dying. And Chopin, in his final delirium, still longs for her. On October 17th, 1849, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Frédéric Chopin takes his last breath. He is 39 years old. Later that morning, Auguste Clesinger, the sculptor who married Solange and who remained somehow in Chopin's orbit, makes a death mask and a plaster cast of Chopin's left hand. The hand that created so much beauty is preserved in white plaster, delicate and still. Before the funeral, according to Chopin's express wish, his heart is removed from his body. His physician, Jean Crouvellier, performs the procedure. The heart is placed in a crystal urn filled with alcohol, perhaps cognac, to preserve it. Ludwika will carry it back to Warsaw, concealing it under her skirts to avoid questions at the Russian border. It will be interred in a pillar in the Church of the Holy Cross on Krakowski Przedmieście Street, beneath an inscription from the Gospel of Matthew. "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." The funeral is delayed for nearly 2 weeks, while arrangements are made. Chopin had requested that Mozart's Requiem be sung, but the Church of the Madeleine, one of Paris's grandest churches, has never allowed female singers in its choir. The Requiem requires soprano and alto soloists. The church authorities debate. Finally, they relent, but with a condition. The female singers must perform hidden behind a black velvet curtain, invisible to the congregation. The funeral takes place on October 30th, 1849. Nearly 3,000 people attend. The crush is so great that the doors must be closed. Hundreds are turned away. The bass Luigi Lablache sings, the same bass who sang at the funerals of Haydn, Beethoven, and Bellini. The mezzo-soprano Pauline Viardot, Chopin's dear friend, sings. Franz Liszt plays the organ. Chopin's preludes in E minor and B minor are performed. The audience weeps. The funeral procession travels from the church in the center of Paris to Père Lachaise Cemetery in the east. The streets are lined with mourners. The procession takes hours. At the grave, musicians play the funeral march from Chopin's Piano Sonata No. 2. The music that Chopin wrote years earlier, never imagining it would accompany his own burial, echoes through the cemetery. Auguste Clesinger designs the tombstone. It features Euterpe, the muse of music, weeping over a broken lyre. The expenses, 5,000 francs, are paid by Jane Sterling. She also pays for Ludwika's return journey to Warsaw. George Sand does not attend the funeral. She is at Nohant when she learns of Chopin's death. She writes in her journal, but we do not know what she writes. Years later, she will publish novels and memoirs that include thinly veiled portraits of Chopin, but she never speaks publicly about their relationship's end or his death. At Père Lachaise, Chopin's grave quickly becomes a pilgrimage site. Even in winter, flowers appear on the tomb. People come from across Europe to pay respects. Some leave notes. Some play his music on instruments brought for the purpose. The grave is never without flowers. It never has been, to this day. And his music lives. What Chopin left behind is not vast in quantity. Unlike Haydn or Mozart or Schubert, he did not compose symphonies or operas or masses. Nearly everything he wrote features the piano, but within that narrow focus, he achieved a depth and variety that is astonishing. His output includes approximately 60 mazurkas, each a miniature masterpiece exploring the rhythms and modes of Polish folk dance while pushing harmonic boundaries into uncharted territories. Late mazurkas like the one in F minor, published after his death, hint at tonality so ambiguous it seems almost modern, almost 20th century. He wrote 16 polonaises, transforming a ceremonial court dance into vehicles for national pride and virtuoso display. The heroic polonaise in A-flat major, Opus 53, is one of the most famous piano pieces ever written. It blazes with triumph and defiance. When Poles under occupation heard it, they heard freedom. He wrote about 20 nocturnes, perfecting a genre invented by John Field, but making it entirely his own. Chopin's nocturnes are not mere salon pieces. They are deeply expressive, harmonically adventurous, structurally sophisticated. The middle sections often contain drama and turbulence. They return to peace, but not unchanged. Something has been revealed. He wrote 24 preludes, published as Opus 28, covering all major and minor keys. Some are less than a minute long. Some are more extended. Together, they form a compendium of musical ideas and emotional states. The prelude in E minor is perhaps 4 pages and 90 seconds, yet it is as profound as works 10 times its length. He wrote 4 ballades. He essentially invented the genre of the piano ballade. These are extended narrative structures without words. They tell stories through purely musical means. Schumann called the first ballade in G minor Chopin's wildest and most original work. He wrote 27 etudes, studies, across 2 published opus numbers, 10 and 25. Previous composers wrote etudes as technical exercises. Chopin wrote etudes that are also concert masterpieces. The Winter Wind Etude, the Ocean Etude, the Waterfall Etude, the Butterfly Etude. Each is both a technical challenge and a work of art. He wrote 4 scherzi. These are not light or playful. They are dramatic, turbulent, passionate. The Scherzo No. 2 in B-flat minor is one of the most thrilling pieces in the piano repertoire. He wrote 3 piano sonatas. The second, with its funeral march, is famous. The third, in B minor, is considered by many to be the finest piano sonata written between Beethoven and Brahms. And he wrote waltzes, impromptus, rondos, a barcarolle, a berceuse, variations, and works for piano and orchestra, including 2 piano concertos. All of this, nearly 200 published works, composed in less than 20 years of mature creativity, and all of it reimagining what the piano could do and say. Chopin understood the piano in a way no one before him had. He understood that the piano could sing like a human voice, that it could whisper and shout, that it could sustain sound through careful pedaling, that it could create colors and textures through the combination of harmony and touch. He taught pianists to think about voicing, bringing out inner melodic lines while subordinating others. He revolutionized fingering, using the thumb on black keys when traditional technique forbade it. He pioneered the use of rubato, flexible tempo that breathes and bends without losing underlying pulse. His harmonic language was revolutionary. He used chromaticism and inharmonic relationships in ways that expanded tonality's possibilities without abandoning it. His music influenced everyone who came after. Liszt learned from Chopin's harmonic daring. Wagner absorbed some of Chopin's chromatic techniques. Debussy and Ravel studied Chopin's use of color and texture. Rachmaninoff and Scriabin were direct inheritors of Chopin's piano aesthetic. And beyond classical music, Chopin's influence spread. Jazz pianists like Bill Evans and Herbie Hancock studied Chopin and absorbed his open harmonies, his use of ninth chords and 11th chords, his sense of space. Film composers use Chopin's techniques to create atmosphere and emotion. His music appears in countless movies, always evoking beauty, melancholy, longing. But perhaps Chopin's greatest achievement is something harder to quantify. He showed that the piano could be a complete musical world unto itself, that a solo pianist in an intimate room could create experiences as profound as any opera or symphony, that small forms could contain infinities. He was the poet of the piano, and his poetry still speaks. Frédéric Chopin lived only 39 years. Half his life was spent in exile, never seeing his homeland again. He never married. He had no children. He suffered chronic illness that sapped his strength and cut short his creativity. He experienced profound love and profound loss. He knew triumph and disappointment, adoration and loneliness. And yet, in those brief years, he created something permanent, something that transcends time and place, something that continues to move people more than a century and a half after his death. When you listen to a Chopin nocturne in the stillness of night, you hear his voice, not metaphorically. Actually, the music is him speaking. It is his hands on the keys, his heart exposed, his soul made audible. When you hear the revolutionary etude, you hear his rage and grief at Poland's subjugation. When you hear the funeral march, you hear his awareness of mortality. When you hear the barcarolle, you hear his longing for beauty in a world that offers so much suffering. When you hear the mazurkas, you hear his homeland, the Poland that lived inside him always, the Poland he could never return to except through music. He once said that music begins where words are powerless to express. His own life proved this truth. The exile who could not go home created a homeland in sound. The sick man who had so little physical strength found infinite strength in his art. The lonely soul who lost the woman he loved found solace and meaning in nocturnes and ballads. Chopin's heart rests in Warsaw, in the church where it was interred in 1850. It survived World War II, removed for safekeeping during the Warsaw Uprising of 1944, then returned when the church was rebuilt from ruins. It remains there today, in a crystal urn within a stone pillar, in the city he left as a young man and never saw again. But his true heart, the heart that still beats, is in the music. Every time a pianist sits down to play a Chopin prelude, his heart beats again. Every time someone hears a nocturne and feels something too deep for words, his heart beats again. Every time a young Polish child learns that a composer from their country created beauty that the whole world treasures, his heart beats again. He died young. He suffered. He lost his homeland and his health and much of what he loved. But he won something more enduring. He won immortality. He won a place in human memory and human emotion that can never be taken away. The tragic poet of the piano still sings, and his song will never end. And so, the story of Frédéric Chopin drifts into silence. His music reminds us that beauty lives in longing, that exile can become art, and that some souls speak most clearly when words fail. If you enjoyed this journey, let yourself rest a little longer. There are more lives, more dreams, more music waiting for you here at the Sleeping Tones. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let the next story carry you into sleep. Good night,